talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies, I'm out of here. I like running better. Welcome back, YouTube viewers, to another video. So, today, I am trying something completely different. If you've seen, I think I've mentioned some old movies before, maybe in some of my older videos. In fact, I'm pretty sure the only time I mentioned them are videos I deleted, but I've always wanted to talk about these old movies for a while. I just never did because there were other things I wanted to talk about more, and I did not think these would do well at all. Now, do I really care that this video is gonna bomb? No, I wanted to make it, so I'm making it. So I'm talking about the Marx Brothers. Now, despite how influential these guys are, I doubt any of my audience have heard of them, sadly. So before I actually get into what I want to talk about them, I have to first give you a little introduction to who they were. So back in the early 20th century, comedy teams were everywhere. You got your Laurel and Hardys, who are the greatest of all time, and your Abbott and Costello, the Three Stooges, a few you probably know. But the Marx Brothers have got to be my second favorite of the classic comedy teams. So they don't really have necessarily a gimmick. It's, well, sort of. So they started off doing a lot of plays together and skits on stage, stuff like that. They have such a long history; it'd be way too much to get into. But eventually, they started making movies, and their first few was four of them: Groucho, the guy with the mustache; Chico, the guy on the left with the pointy hat; Harpo, the guy with the weird clown-like wig; and then Zeppo, the just normal-looking guy. Zeppo left after their fifth movie, I think. But all their movies are basically just this. They're not all the same thing, but they follow the similar formula for their characters. Groucho is the leader of something or has some kind of authority on something. Chico and Harpo are always partners, get mixed into it somehow, and then Zeppo is just kind of there for the ride. He doesn't really have much of a personality. So, I guess now it's time to just talk about them individually and then get into their movies and discuss what worked and what really did not work. Also, anyone excited for Sonic Racing Crossworlds? Saw the trailer today? That was awesome. Okay, but his lines are just iconic. His mannerisms, his face. I mean, you ever see those glasses with the fake mustache? That's his face. That's supposed to be Groucho Marx's face, but he is hilarious. His character, he's a kind of like a Yakko, or I guess Yakko Warner is kind of like a Groucho Marx type, where he's got this fast-talking guy who's always trying to stay on top of everyone, and in a way he is, because he says so much ridiculous stuff that people can't even understand what he's going on about anymore. He has so many iconic lines, whether it be something like, I don't like Junior crossing the street by himself. Come to think of it, I don't like Junior very much at all. Or how about, why didn't you tell me the story over the phone? I can't tell you. It's that sort of a story, yeah? You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'll be right over. It just has so many lines. Or one of my favorites. Oh, I know him. He was my neighbor in the barrel next door. That's kind of just his character. He's just a fast-talking guy. Probably has the most screen time too. He's at his best though when he has scenes with Margaret Dumont, who is in a few other movies. Her character is usually just that she's kind of dumb, or not, and a little, not naive, or I think naive would be a good way to put it. And so she just, for some reason, really likes Groucho Marx. That's usually her character in these movies. Or in every movie, he has a really funny scene with Chico, who, speaking of Chico, if you're going to talk about him, you also have to talk about Harpo too, because they're always paired up in these movies. I said before, Harpo and Chico are always just these two guys that somehow get mixed up into whatever's going on. Let's say in one of the movies, they are two spies for their country. In another one, they are I can't entirely remember what they were. Oh, yeah, I think it was they worked for a college or something. I mean, that's something different. Yeah, they worked for a college. I haven't seen some of these movies in a little bit, so it's kind of hard to remember. But yeah, so Chico how always doing this Italian accent. He's supposed to be from Italy, and he's always trying to make money. He and Harpo are always trying to make money, so that's why they're always involved in these crazy schemes. They'll say stuff like, "Hey, they're told to go kidnap couple of football players, and they'll get paid for it." Or yeah, I said before they were spies. They're spies for the country. Go shadow the leader of the rival country and dig up some dirt on him. That's what they do. And Harpo doesn't. So what's funny is that Chico is always talking, much like Groucho. He's a fast talker. It's pretty funny too. Harpo doesn't talk, but he has so much personality because he always has these crazy facial expressions, or gookies they're called, or he's always just randomly pulling things out of nowhere. Or at least that's what it was like in his early movies. But that's his character. He's just completely insane. So when you pair up these two guys with just, I guess, somewhat regular people, is a good way to put it, you get hilarity. So I want to talk about their movies now. You may be wondering, why didn't I talk about Zebo, who I mentioned earlier? Well, when I mentioned him earlier, I said he doesn't have much personality. Eventually, after he left, they just replaced his character with different actors depending on the movie. It really didn't matter. But I want to talk about other movies that are actually worth mentioning. So we have to start off with their very first film, The Coconuts. This movie's from 1929, so it is in the public domain now, and you can probably find a copy of it on YouTube. You can find a good copy in the Internet Archive. In fact, you can find all the good copies of all their movies on the Internet Archive. I'll link it in the description, this big file with them. But so because this movie's age isn't even the best versions of it are still a little bit wishy-washy in the restoration, but they're still good enough. So this movie is just about how it was I think something about this hotel boom that was going on in Florida in the mid-20s. So about 100 years ago now. Oh boy. So Groucho is believe he's the owner of a hotel that's not doing so well. But I guess he invested in the hotel, because hotels are making a lot of money at the time. We get some great lines from him, like where he says to his employees who are demanding pay, "Oh, demanding pay. Did George Washington's men demand pay? They did, sir. Oh, and where are they now, huh?" And Chico and Harpo get involved in it, trying to buy up property around this area and make money. And Margaret Dumont's there. This movie's a little all over the place and kind of hard to keep track of what happened because I've only seen this one once. All the other ones I mentioned, I saw 2 or 3 times, at least. But this one's just really funny. Despite being their first one, you could already tell they had a lot of jokes and ideas they wanted to do. Now, granted, this one's based on a play, so I'm sure they already had the story in mind, but there's just this interesting feel this one has. Like, for example, it has these big musical numbers, which I'm not a fan of. Because if there's anything that all of these movies suffer from, except for their best one, it's that they just feel like they can't just be funny. They have to shove in these boring subplots and big flashy musical numbers that just don't really fit. Now for their first few movies, it wasn't too bad because they only took up a few minutes. They just showed up every now and then, but most of the movies were just supposed to be funny. Now when they stop doing that, we'll get to that, believe me. Yeah, The Coconuts is just a really fun movie, and it definitely set the standard for what they were going to be like, but I think the one that really set up, yeah, this is what they do, was their next film, Animal Crackers, which I think is also in the public domain now. I don't know. So this movie is just so good, and probably their second most iconic film. So the Margaret Dumont, who I mentioned before, is some rich lady, and she's inviting all these fancy people to her house for a week or something, for this big gathering and artsy social thing or whatever. And she also invites Jeffrey T. Spalding, who's just returned from exploring Africa, and he returns with this big musical number that is just hilarious and became Groucho Marx's intro, which is "Hooray for Captain Spaulding," which you just look up on YouTube. It's great. And then also she invites Harpo and Chico, who are professors. They're not college professors, so I'm not really sure what that means. I used to know, but they're music professors, which, yeah, in every single movie, Harpo has a harp solo, which are really boring, and Chico has a piano solo, which are usually boring. But what works about his piano solo in this one is that jokes are going on while it's happening. Like, he's playing it for a while, and someone asks him, "Hey, why don't you play this tune?" And he says, "I don't know that one." and they just continuously plays the exact same beat nonstop because he doesn't remember how it ends. So this one is, what's the actual plot though? Once the social gathering happens, simple. Um, so excuse me. Um, what is it? Oh yeah. So there's this big painting in the well, Margaret Dumont owns this huge painting that's really fancy, and everyone wants to see it. But one of this guy who's in love with her daughter, also wants to be a great painter someday. So he makes a reproduction of it, and he has Harpo and Chico swap it with the real painting. So when everyone sees it and says, "Wow, it's amazing," he'll say, "That isn't the original. I did it myself. It's just that I'm that good an artist." But through about a bunch of other circumstances, people think the painting is stolen, and they spend the movie trying to find out what happened to it. And that's all you really need to know. You might think, "Gosh, that sounds really simple. Isn't there a little more to it?" And no, because why does there need to be? It's a comedy. And yeah, there is some boring romance stuff in here, which it's not that I don't mind romance plots. It's just that this doesn't fit this movie. It just shouldn't have been here. It's also followed by a 5-minute harp solo, but whatever. Overall, Animal Crackers is just hilarious. Like seriously, it is so funny. Next is Monkey Business. I think it's worth knowing once you get here that their first 5 films were made at Paramount, and this is definitely the weakest of their Paramount movies. It's not bad, it's just it feels a little too much like it's going through the motions. So this one is kind of like 2 movies in one. It begins with the Marx Brothers being discovered as stowaways on a ship, and the stuff on the ship is pretty funny. But after that, they get back to land, and there's this big party and all that. It gets too confusing and kind of tiring, but it's still quite a funny movie. I don't really have a ton to say about this one specifically compared to the others. It's just more of the same. Eh, horse feathers. Horse feathers is just phenomenal. I mean, one of the first lines in this movie is, "Gentlemen, I came to this college to take my son out of it." So in this one, Groucho works at a college, and in the beginning he's getting a promotion. He is now the headmaster. And in this one, Zeppo is his son, which I don't know, I just find that kind of funny. And there's this big football game going on at the college, and there's stuff about prohibition because that was going on about this time. That's in this one about a speakeasy, which great scene. It's basically just find these football players and do the big game, and just a bunch of college jokes too. They're just really funny. There's this relatively long sequence where the Marx Brothers just walk into a biology class and effectively just kick out the professor and start going on about whatever. Horse Feathers is great, but their absolute best movie, and if you check my letterbox profile, I know this is on my list of favorite movies. Duck Soup. Duck Soup is perfect. No sugarcoating, it is literally just perfect. This, in my opinion, is the greatest comedy of all time. It has absolutely none of the problems that the previous and following films did. It's only an hour 8 minutes, so you can watch it pretty quickly, and it has no boring musical numbers. It has one musical number, but it's actually quite good and fits the tone of the film. No boring subplots that make you cut away from the stuff you came here to see. It is joke after joke after joke. And one can say, isn't that kind of tiring? But no. The reason it's not is because it does it with such a sense of style, and this is what it's going for. It's so into itself, it does it perfectly. Basically every joke lands. Even the ones that don't, you know the next one is probably gonna land. At the time, it wasn't too well liked. People said it was too silly. But these days, yeah, it's regarded as one of the greatest comedies of all time because it really is just that good. I mean, just has so many iconic scenes despite being the shortest film. The mirror scene, the scene in the garden, I believe, I think it is. The musical number, the ending. Oh boy, the ending. I've seen this movie probably 4 or 5 times, and every time I watch it, I laugh really hard, so hard to the point of where it hurts. I'm not making that up. Also, anything? Well, what about the plot though? Because I haven't actually mentioned the plot of this movie. So, despite being their shortest and silliest, it probably has the most complicated plot of their Paramount films. Well, except for maybe Monkey Business, but it doesn't feel complicated. So it's there are these two countries, Fredonia and this. I do not remember the name of the other one because it's only said one time. But yeah, so there's Fredonia and the rival country, as I say, and they have a lot. There's a lot of tension going on between the two countries. They might go to war. Margaret Dumont is the ambassador between them, and Groucho Marx is just playing her because he knows that she kind of likes him and she's rich and he'll get rich and help his country. But the leader of the other country wants her to marry him, I guess, so he can get the money and have some extra sway over his country, which would help. And then the rival country sends Chico and Harpo to spy on Groucho, and it's just it is so ridiculous. Like I don't really know how to describe Duck Soup. It's something you just have to see for yourself. And you may think, am I hyping this up too much? Does it live up to the hype? Yes, I guarantee you, Duck Soup lives up to the hype. Now, if you think, well, I want a comedy that's more witty, not one that's just super silly, don't worry, this movie does have a lot of jokes that are genuinely just pretty witty. Duck Soup is perfection. What did they follow up with that? Well, you see, Duck Soup didn't bomb when it came out, but it didn't do that well. It's pretty clear that with a new Marx Brothers movie every year, people were just getting kind of tired of them. But here's this producer named Irving Thalberg from MGM, which isn't even really a thing anymore, came up to Groucho Marx and said, "Groucho, I want to make a real movie with you." That should already give you some signs of what became of the Marx Brothers afterward. In A Night at the Opera. Now, this movie is actually pretty well liked, especially when it came out. It is regarded as one of their best, but I cannot stand A Night at the Opera. Neither can my family. We've watched these movies together and we just do not care about this one. It is so boring. The regular other movies averaged about, I don't know, an hour 30, 3 minutes, something like that. This is something like an hour 43 minutes, which is too long for the Marx Brothers. But it's not just because it's stuffed with jokes, it's because, as I said, the producer of this film said, I want to make a real movie with you. Contrast that with the producer of the Paramount films who said, I could watch a movie that is just the brothers standing in front of a wall making jokes and doing ridiculous things and I'd watch it. This guy wanted things to be serious and have a real plot. Basically, the Marx Brothers are just there for the ride instead of, it is kind of how they were before. It really feels that way. Because, as I mentioned before, a problem with the earlier films is that those boring subplots that distract you from what you wanted to see. But this one, the boring subplots are the main plot. The Marx Brothers are the B plot. So while this movie does have some really funny parts, like the I think it's called the stateroom scene. You can probably look it up on YouTube. It's great. Has the contract scene. I love the contract scene. Or the line where you boys better hurry up. You're gonna be late for jail. And yeah, the Marx Brothers are still doing a good job acting here with all their jokes. It's just that they don't get to do as much. Like Harpo used to be this unstoppable force of nature, but now since they wanted to make it a real movie and it can't be too ridiculous, they had to get rid of the gags where he could just pull out anything from out of nowhere. He gets beat up in one scene, which is just not pleasant. Margaret Dumont isn't portrayed as being as stupid as she was before, which kind of breaks her entire personality. And overall, this movie is just dull because the base idea of it is the Marx Brothers get involved in this plot with an opera house and an opera singer. That sounds really funny. And what worked about the other ones is that it was the Marx Brothers get involved with some ordeal with all these rich, uptight people, and then they just cause complete pandemonium among these people. But that's just not here anymore. There's this scene toward the end where they start playing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" during the opera show. This should be funny, but it's just downplayed so much, it just doesn't feel that funny. In conclusion, so I'm going to mention a few other movies they did before I just wrap up my final thoughts, which is that after they did A Night at the Opera, it was a huge success. So that producer, he died after it was made, did one more movie with them, A Day at the Races. A Day at the Races is better. It has more jokes that are funnier. It has the Tootsie Frutti ice cream scene, which is just perfect. It's probably one of the best scenes in any comedy movie ever made. It has some other good stuff. I like the idea that Groucho Marx this time is a horse doctor. This is what people used to call a veterinarian. And then they get mixed up with stuff with the horse races, but and Margaret Dumont acts more like Margaret Dumont. But the problem is that, again, the movie is just too long. It still has too much boring stuff going on, so it just doesn't feel interesting. You're just waiting for it to be over, waiting for the few funny segments to actually happen. But then they did a few more movies which were not really well received and did not do too well when they came out. I didn't even see all of them. Room Service is apparently terrible. I have not seen it. I haven't seen A Night in Casablanca, which apparently sucks. Um, I have seen two of them though. The A Day at the Circus, I believe it's called. At the Circus, yeah. At the Circus, it's pretty good actually. Margaret Dumont's in it, but she's not really in it toward the end. Her personality isn't quite right, and it's got some funny segments. I think it's definitely an improvement over A Night at the Opera and A Day at the Races, but overall, it's just kind of missing something. The Big Store is just terrible. Like, I don't have anything else to say. It is the most dull thing you will ever see. It has one funny line. That's it. One funny line. What is the plot of it? I can barely even remember. It's just something to do with a department store. I'm pretty sure that's all I remember from it. At least for A Night at the Opera, I can remember what happens, but that one is just blah. So, I hope this video persuaded you guys to check out the Marx Brothers if you haven't, because I doubt you have. There are some really great old comedies like this, and comedy teams that I think you, my viewers, should check out. I think you'll find some of these jokes to be really funny, because you might say, but these movies are 90 years old, they must be so unfunny. No, they're not. Because our modern senses of humor really are shaped from people like these. And I think it's important to see what comedy used to be and how it's kind of soured, not soured over the years, but it just kind of declined. Because we used to have guys like this, guys that were ridiculous, but also super sharp and witty. Um, character People like Laurel and Hardy, Jack Benny, the Three Stooges, Abbott and Costello, or I'd say comedy from the 20s to the 60s. That stuff was brilliant. So brilliant. Other people, Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, and so many others I don't really even remember. The old sitcoms of the 50s, 60s, and I guess 70s too. Great stuff. And yeah, just old comedy used to be really special, and I think it's important to just, considering how much I enjoy old comedies like these, I think it's just good of me to make a video talking about these and hopefully getting a few of you guys to watch these, because I doubt this video is going to do too well. So I hope for those of you who do see it that you decide to give the Marx Brothers a watch. If you're going to watch any of them, watch Animal Crackers and Duck Soup. So that's all for now, and remember to stay way past cool.